Deadly Desire, the Brendan Banfield trial. Day number 2 in the courts today. I'm Chad Ricardo, joined by Vernon Miles. Vernon, day 2 of a trial that is sure to rock the DMV and beyond. Your thoughts on today?
We have been covering this all day. It started with the opening arguments from the defense and the prosecution where they laid out what's ahead for this trial. And then it moved into some talk with the first responders. These are the people who were first there at the scene, who saw what happened and talked to the suspects right immediately after the murder. And then it ended with some explosive testimony from au pair Juliana Magalhaes. She is the au pair who is at the center of this case.
And speaking of the center of this case, Fox 5's very own Bob Barnhart has been at the center from the beginning of it as he joins us now from Virginia. Bob, you've been in trial. You've been there inside of the building. Your thoughts on today?
Yeah, hey there, Chad and Bernie. It was very interesting because the day started right at 10 o'clock. Opening statements from the lead prosecutor, Jenna Sands, who laid out her case that this was indeed an affair between the au pair and one of her bosses that started not long after she started working for the family in their rested home back in late 2021. And then the defense, of course, said, hey, don't believe everything you're hearing. She was forced into this because the au pair was initially charged with second-degree murder. She pled to involuntary manslaughter, and this is not the story that really is the truth. That said, by the end of the day, when they took their break at a 15-minute break at 3 o'clock, we could hear that, yes, we'll bring her in from the jail and we'll have her. It's like, oh, this is going to happen today because, as Vernon mentioned, we initially heard from the prosecutor, defense attorney, several of the first arriving Fairfax County police officers on the scene with their body-worn camera. We heard from the ME about the autopsies for Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan. And then they took this break at 3 o'clock, and here she is. The au pair takes the stand on this very busy first day of testimony in this trial. She was on for 2 hours, Juliana Magalhaes, and she kind of talked about coming from Brazil, getting hired by the Banfields, initially really liking Christine and their 4-year-old daughter, and that she really didn't have a relationship with Brendan, who was an IRS agent and a hardworking guy, supposedly, but that over time, she still loved Christine and the daughter, but fell in love with Brendan, and that they would travel together, and that, according to Juliana, Brendan finally decided, look, I want to be away from Christine. I don't want to divorce her because that means paying alimony and sharing custody of their daughter. I want her gone. And according to Juliana, the whole planning of the murder was at Brendan's instruction and at his behest. And basically, she laid out that he didn't want to hire a hitman because he thought, because he is in law enforcement, investigators could easily trace that back to him, or he could be set up with someone who's posing as a hitman and is an undercover officer. So for whatever reason, according to Juliana, Brendan decided to seek out this FetLife fetish website and try to find someone who they could lure to the house under the guise of bringing a knife and having, violent sex play with Christine, and then we'll show up and kill him and then kill Christine and say, hey, this guy was stabbing her, so we killed him, and that's how this all happened. It took a while because, according to Juliana, everybody that they were initially in contact with through the Telegram app and texting through that platform were all like, look, we're veteran role players. We'll do this stuff, but let's first meet and meet for lunch at a diner or go have a drink. I'm not just going to come to your house and do what you're asking me to do. What if your husband comes home and catches us? And, well, they were all savvy, except sadly for Joseph Ryan, this 39-year-old from Springfield who was in a long, ongoing series of communications with both Brendan and Juliana posing as Christine. They created this profile as Christine. They finally found someone who was willing, without ever meeting or going face-to-face beforehand, to come to the house and meet Christine and do this violent rape by knife point and bondage kind of experience. And well, it was actually, according to Juliana, she and Brendan who lured in this Joseph Ryan. And when he arrived at the house, Juliana says Brendan had planned the procedure and what all happened. I want to play a clip for you guys of Juliana on the stand explaining some of what happened, and then I'll kind of fill in the rest.
All I could see was like Joe at the moment. I knew it was Joe, like on top of Christine, in a way, on the scribe holding her down. And that was my first view as soon as I get into the bedroom. Brendan said, he yelled, police officer. And Christine's first reaction, that was the first time I heard she say anything at that point. And she yelled back at Brendan, saying, Brendan, he has a knife. And yeah, that's when Brendan first shot Joe.
And see, guys, that was pretty sad from my point. And I stayed in the courtroom throughout her testimony. And when she described Christine as calling out to Brendan, hey, he's got a knife, it kind of plays to this whole scenario that they were trying to set up, that she thought there was a guy who had broken into the house and was trying to rape her at knife point, is the sense you get from Juliana's testimony of what she heard Christine saying from the floor with this guy over her, like, he's got a knife, be careful. And that's when Brendan shot Joe Ryan in the head. And then later on, Juliana says that Brendan stabbed her with a knife in her throat, and the ME talked about it, and the not crime scene technicians, but really the first officers and sergeant who arrived there on the crime scene described, gaping holes in the neck, and she was still had a pulse, so they rushed her out of the house. But it was really awful to hear Christine kind of calling out, looking for help from Brendan, that, hey, this guy's got a knife, be careful, when in fact, according to Juliana and prosecutors, her husband's the one who got that guy to go into the bedroom with a knife. And just a whole bloody crazy scene that led to 2 deaths. And after many months of investigating and what have you, the arrests of Juliana first, now Brendan, almost 3 years after the murders, which were on February 24th, 2023, we are at trial. They say it's going to last 4 weeks, but they just packed so much into day one. We just wonder what's still ahead, guys. There's a lot of evidence and testimony to come, but it was an action-packed and emotional first day.
Now, Bob, from what I understand, Christine tried to get Juliana to call 911. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened after that?
What she says is that, yes, that Christine told Juliana to call 911, but that not by saying anything, but with a gesture, Brendan was like, hang that up. So she had dialed 911, kind of freaking out and kind of doing what she thought her one boss wanted her to do. Meanwhile, the other boss, the lover, was like, no, don't do that. And that eventually she did call 911. But earlier in the day, the very first witness was the person in charge of the 911 call center, who was talking about the calls that came in, and that the first call, I think it was at 7:47 a.m. or whatever, was just like 10 seconds and a hang up. So the 911 call center called back and left a voicemail saying, hey, let us know if you need anything. And it was about 15, 20 minutes later when the second call was made, and Juliana did call 911, was on the phone briefly, and then Brendan took over. So it does go to her story, Juliana's story, that she made a call to 911 because Christine's freaking out on the floor with this guy above her, but that was not how Brendan wanted the whole morning to play out. And so she hung up the first time and called back just a short time later.
Bob, take me back in this story. So the call is made, and the gentleman, unfortunately, who is no longer with us, he comes into the house. Is that what happened? He came in. Was the door unlocked? How did he get in? How did he get to the wife, essentially? Lay that out for us, for anyone who's not as familiar with the story.
Oh my goodness, it is complicated. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. But Christine was an ICU nurse, a registered nurse at Inova Fairfax Hospital. So the sense we get is that this was one of those mornings where she had worked at night and she had gone into the house, and Brendan and Juliana were going to know this, that she would be home in bed at 7:30 in the morning after working. And so using a phone app, Brendan, who had left the home that morning, was able to unlock the front door.
Yeah.
Because they had told this Joe Ryan, come here, sneak in the house, because he thinks it's the wife who's upstairs, Christine, saying, this is the plan we've been working on for weeks. Sneak into the house, come upstairs with a knife, tie me up. Whether it's actually, I don't know how these things work, but whether to rape her or simulate a rape, come on up here. In the meantime, Juliana says she was with the baby girl, the 4-year-old girl, in her car at the end of the cul-de-sac, which is right there, waiting. And that Brendan had gone to a nearby McDonald's to wait. And so when Joe Ryan pulls into the driveway and goes inside, that's when Juliana, for whatever reason, called Christine's phone, which was in the kitchen, not up in the bedroom, made that phone call for whatever reason, and then called Brendan at the McDonald's. He also called the phone number. It really wasn't explained, and it didn't make sense to us. Was that part of the cover story or what have you? But they called in to her phone, and then Brendan came to the house. They went inside. They left the daughter in the basement. They went upstairs, and that's when the confrontation happened, when almost immediately Brendan shot Joe Ryan in the head, who was on the floor with Christine. She called out, and then Juliana says eventually Brendan stabbed his wife in the neck. She was rushed to the hospital, died. Joe was on the floor, dead, after Juliana, who said, I hear him moving, I see him moving, there's something going on, fired on her own a shot into the chest of Joe Ryan, and then called 911. And it came to light. I mean, I was there that morning. We got there not long afterward, and were there at the scene that morning as this whole thing started to unfold, not knowing all these crazy details.
Wow.
And now, to make sure people are aware, so the daughter was in the house the whole time this was going down.
Yeah, she was initially in the car with the au pair when Joe Ryan pulled into the driveway and went inside, and then the daughter was with the au pair until the dad, Brendan, came home, and then the three of them went in the house together through the back, apparently, which kind of is on the basement level, supposedly, left the girl downstairs, and then and gave her an iPad to watch videos, is what Juliana says. And then the two of them, Juliana and Brendan, went upstairs where the ultimate, in moments, the murder scene played out.
Of course, that is another one of the charges that Brendan is being charged with for that 4-year-old being in the house. I wonder, Bob, when Juliana was laying out all of the things that went down, did she ever speak to why it is that she ultimately decided to go along with this plan? Because that was a choice that she had as well. She didn't have to go along with it.
She really didn't. It was almost as if Brendan, put a spell on her, and, they were lovers, not equal. She was 21, 22, and he was 38, 39. She was his employee making $200 a week, she said. And the sense you get is that maybe she did fall in love with this guy, but for whatever reason went along with this plot. And she said, that he told her early on in their relationship he wanted to get rid of Christine and not divorce her, and she never, being young, not from our country, enamored with this guy, maybe, you see him sitting in court and he's just kind of sitting there, maybe he was a charming fella, but she never kind of resisted in her own telling this story as it played out, as one step after another led to them creating this this fake profile under Christine's name on this FetLife website, and then seeking people to lure in, knowing, because also one of the other things, Juliana says that Brendan got her a gun, and at least on 2 occasions they went to a driving range. There were photos that she posted on social media of herself shooting at a target. So she knew all along that she was learning how to fire a gun, and Brendan, in her testimony, Brendan wanted to kill his wife, and she went along with it. You know, she did not explain why. She did seem emotional a couple of times, talking about how much she really loved the daughter. They mentioned her name in open court. I'm not going to mention it here. But, you know, she did kind of dab her eyes at one point when she was talking about the little girl, I think realizing as she's telling the story in front of a not packed courtroom, but a courtroom with a lot of folks and a jury there, that, like, I was part of this thing that has really messed up this girl's life for sure. The only other time, and I forget exactly what she had just said, but it was kind of at the end of the story where she was talking about going upstairs and Brendan shooting Joe Ryan and then stabbing his wife, and then she shooting Joe Ryan and calling 911. She stopped in the middle of like a sentence. She just stopped, and I didn't see her dab her eyes, but you could see she was getting choked up and was having a tough time continuing on. So she showed a couple of bursts of emotion, but otherwise was just kind of laying it out like it was a story you and I would read in a novel somewhere.
Of course, I know her testimony is expected to continue tomorrow, so we'll be seeing more of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Bob, again, and I asked you this yesterday, I was referring to Brendan then, but after hearing this testimony today, if you had an opportunity to ask the au pair one question from everything that you heard today, what would that question be and why?
I'm sure it's, well, 2 things. Do you regret a lot of things? Ever taking the job, falling in love with this guy, and then being under his spell and doing what he told you to do? Do you have regrets at this point for what you were involved in? And then the second thing, and I think it's what John Carroll, who is Brendan Banfield's attorney, is going to get at, is, you know, is she, if she could do it away from the judge and the jury, is this really what happened? Because the defense is going to say she's making it up, she was pressured, she doesn't want to spend a good chunk of the rest of her life in prison, because under the plea deal for her pleading to involuntary manslaughter after originally being charged with second-degree murder, supposedly what they're talking about is that she's going to get time served and be deported back to Brazil. So, you know, is she telling this story because she wants a lighter sentence? Or, as Banfield's attorney is going to hammer at, and he alluded to in his opening statement, was she pressured by the police to give them the story they wanted? And so that's what I would ask her as my second question, is like, are you telling the truth? Like, you know, this isn't going to be decided by a judge or jury. Just Bob wants to know, is this the truth? What is the truth?
What is the truth? That is, of course, what it is that we are looking to find out. This was day 2. Day 3 of the trial is coming up on tomorrow. And Bob, you will be there as you have every step of the way. Thank you so very much.
You bet, guys. Good to see you.
All right. Deadly Desire, the Brendan Banfield on trial. What a day.
What a day.
Yeah.
And we expect more weeks of this, too. So it should be at least a 3, maybe 4-week trial.
3 to 4 week trial, and every day at or around 4:15, we will have this podcast featuring Bob Barnhart and everything that he learned from inside the courts. We'll bring it for you right here exclusively on Fox Local and YouTube. Thank you all very much. We'll see you tomorrow.